Black History Month in 2021 is being looked at through a different lens. Kamala Harris becoming the first black woman to be elected vice president was a huge milestone. But the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others have continued the fight for equality and equity of black people. KTTC's Kamaria Bray shows us how decades of demonstrations for equal rights are now at a pivotal stage in history. Kamaria.
We've seen the outrage, the tears, heard the chants, and many may think this is a phase and that it will soon pass. But the reality is this is an everyday fight for African Americans, a fight that began decades ago. Today's movement is a continuation and reaching its next chapter.
Black Lives Matter movement is but an extension of the civil rights movement because they have reawakened, or should I say, woken people to that struggle. This is another chapter in this long story, but it's the same story.
Mahmoud El-Kati is a Twin Cities African American Studies professor and civil rights advocate.
They're exhuming some of the old things that we did in the 60s, the way that looks, except it's more powerful in some ways than the 1960s. It makes the 60s look like child's play because we've gone beyond America. This movement is a genuinely international movement.
We have a duty to fight for our freedom!
An international movement carrying weight after the death of George Floyd last summer.
What's his name? George Floyd! George Floyd!
But the original civil rights demonstrations began in the South.
Most people would say that Memphis is ground zero for the civil rights movement. They would usually say that that's because of what happened with Dr. King and his untimely death in Memphis.
Pastor Earle Fisher is a Memphis civil rights activist.
But people also don't know that there wouldn't be a 14th Amendment if there was not for the Memphis massacre that took place in the late 1800s, which was really rooted in this race riot in response to some police brutality.
The 1950s and 60s were pivotal decades for the civil rights movement. From the Greensboro sit-ins protesting segregation to Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
In the 60s, the conversation was primarily about equality. But in the 21st century, the conversation has been, and rightfully so, more about equity.
When a Black person or an African American or a minority does something, you know, there's quick conviction. And when somebody else does something, well, you get a slap in the wrist.
Wale Elegbede is the Rochester NAACP president.
We're on the cusp where we have an opportunity to really demand just, more big changes. Change is not going to come if we don't put in the work.
And now a new generation is pushing for change, like Courtney Armburst.
I don't think that our generation is going to sit down and take any no's for any, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. This is what we want and we're going to get it. And no matter how long it takes, we're going after it.
Zachary Metzger walked 730 miles from where George Floyd died to Breonna Taylor's home.
I feel like it's always a continuation and there's always going to be new people. More people need to have humanity as a career. That's a Martin Luther King quote that I love because it's pivotal. It changes the way we look at things. And I just feel like I'm really walking in my purpose.
As for the elders of the movement, they continue to encourage those younger to keep their ancestors' journey in mind as the mission continues.
So right now, and I contend that we are in a place where America is breaking up from what it was, and it's becoming something else.
I salute and stand in solidarity with every meaningful measure of resistance against white supremacy and all forms of bigotry. So I salute all of those who are marching, and I ask them to continue to do that.
We know that the unfortunate death of George Floyd has created a lot of policy changes. What is the next chapter when it comes to Black history?
My mother would say that we are always living our history today, and I think she's absolutely right. And I think to underscore both the symbolism of progress through Vice President Kamala Harris the election of Barack Obama. I think the next step is for us to continue to advocate and organize and to mobilize people to ensure that there are more policies, that these aren't some exceptions, but more aligned with the rule.
I think it's a generation of people that pack a little bit more punch. They're more driven to get the work done in ways that may hit the pockets of the rich. It's going to be equity, and it's going to be us taking back or taking what is ours. So when it comes to Black history, I think we're on a new wave.
In the words of the late Representative John Lewis, when you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. I'm Kamari Bray.